Hey, welcome to the show. Everybody joining us on the podcast on Lust is Boring. Those people tuning in on Facebook Live. Today we've got Paul J. Kim on the show. It's going to be a fun show talking about basically Catholic adulting, how to date like a grown-up. Because as I see it, in the dating world, you've got a lot of like junior high school kids that are wrestling with adult problems, and you've got a lot of adults wrestling with problems that probably should have ended in junior high. And so we're going to try to get this thing caught up so that how do we actually date and discern and live in a happy marriage as full-grown adults. And so Paul J. Kim is going to come on and talk to us about that. But before we bring him onto the show, a couple exciting updates. First and foremost, the book that Matt, Fred, and I have been working on, here's a sneak peek at the cover, called Forged. This is a book. We just sent it to the typesetter, so that means it'll be heading off for the printer in a couple weeks. Should be ready in mid-November. It is a 33-day journey for guys on how to break free from lust, whether it be porn, impurity in your imagination with yourself, with your girlfriend, even within a marriage. 33-day kind of devotional where every day you've got a meditation, a spiritual exercise, and then you're going to get a free video that's going to show up every day on your phone during the journey by me, by Paul Kim, by Father Mike Schmitz, by Father Jacques Philippe, a bunch of different experts on different subjects to help you to live this thing out. And so if you're a guy or you've got a guy in your life who you want to encourage to do the program, you just click the link below or just go to chastity.com. And right there in the shop, we've got a link where you can pre-order the book. Now, they're only sold in pairs. We are not going to sell individual copies because of how important we think it is for guys to have brotherhood as they go through this program. Because I think a lot of guys tend to want to do it by ourselves, kind of go Lone Ranger, but we're so adamant that that is not the way to conquer sin. You've got to have a brother by your side, or better yet, a whole team of them. And so if you pre-order the book before it's available, we're just going to give you both copies for the price of one. So it's a buy one, get one free kind of thing. And so the book, as I had mentioned, is Forged, Just for Guys by Matt, Fred, and I, coming out in a couple weeks. Another thing for the ladies, we've got an ebook for you for free on basically the top 10 guys to avoid. It's called 10 Guys You're Better Off Without. And so if you want to get that ebook, it kind of runs through all the guys that you basically want to break up with even before you start dating them to save yourself the hassle. If you want to know what that list is, unfortunately, you might recognize some or all of them. Just go to chastity.com/10guys. That's the number 10, the word guys, and you get the ebook for free. Or just click the link below. And then lastly, we've got a free offer for you if you want to try the app Hollow for 14 days. Now, this is the number one Catholic app in the United States store right now. And I think it's the number one app for really good reason. I mean, today I was driving home just from dropping off the kids at school and hitting the gym. I got a 20-minute drive. And I remember a quote St. John Paul II said that, we must arrange our lives in such a way that everything brings glory to God. And so if you think, if I got a 20-minute car ride, how can I arrange this car ride in such a way that it will bring glory to God? And you could spend it in silent prayer. You can maybe listen to some praise and worship or just time in silence. But what I found to be really helpful is this app, Hollow, because as you're pulling out of your parking spot, you can kind of pick, okay, I want to listen to a homily from Father Mike Schmitz, or I want to pray a litany of the saints. I want to do my daily examination of conscience. You just click the button. And while you're driving, you can just feed yourself this awesome content. Because, on our phones, the media, there's so much junk out there. But there's also an unprecedented amount of awesome content. And Hollow, I think, is a perfect example of that. So if you click the link in the bio or just go to hollow.com/lustisboring, the name of this podcast, you can try the app for free for 14 days. And so check it out. The book Forged, 10 guys to avoid, and the Hollow app, all that stuff to check out. It's all in the show notes to take a look at. Now, today, our guest, Paul J. Kim, longtime friend of mine, incredible Catholic speaker, beatboxer. You perhaps have seen him at Catholic youth conferences or young adult events. Paul J. Kim. This guy is an incredible ambassador of the Catholic faith. So I want to bring you on. So, Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on your computer.
Oh, I'm very glad to have this intimate exchange with you on the screen. So now you have had some exciting news in your life. I believe you just brought a new member into the Paul J. Kim family.
I didn't do much. It was mainly my wife, as you know.
Oh, don't underestimate the contribution that males play, in bringing children into life. Well, women just do the gestation, lactation thing. I mean, we do the heavy lifting. So.
Oh yeah. So that's your wife. No, we've been blessed, Jason. My family and I, we recently transplanted ourselves outside of California into Austin, Texas. And so we're happy to say now that we're Texans and we can use the word y'all because it's much more efficient and better use of time and phrases. So we love it here, man. There's a lot of good Catholics out here, good people. We've been certainly blessed with community, and cost of living's cheaper, values, HEB. Woo, woo.
Yeah. That's awesome. And mom's doing well and baby's okay and everything?
Well, yep. Baby was born about 2 weeks ago. So, it's our fourth child. We have a fifth one in heaven. We try not to forget him. We had a miscarriage. I think that was our second baby. And so we just want to throw a shout out to our little boy in heaven. But also, this is our fourth here, at least ones that we have to take care of, buy diapers for, this sort of thing. And so we're blessed. Yeah, his name is Micah Joseph. Strong Old Testament name, and certainly wanted to get the patronage of St. Joseph into his life as well, because he's been a big part of our year as we've had to make some big decisions and moving and otherwise, and we felt the intercession of St. Joseph in a beautiful way. So yeah, we're doing well. We're just living our life out here, 2020, craziest year ever. And just seeing the silver lining in it all and being grateful,
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I know you guys are under his protection. I saw in your social media post a couple weeks ago, you guys in a pretty bad car accident and relatively unscathed.
Yeah, exactly. That was about a month and a half ago. We were driving home from a friend's house pretty late at night, and it was our left-hand turn on an intersection. It was a green arrow and everything, so it was our go. We're turning, and this guy basically blows through a red light. And he wasn't intoxicated, but my thought is he was probably on his phone, because, we were about 3 seconds into that left-hand turn. There's no reason why you would try to gun a red light after that long unless you had a death wish. And so this guy blows through the red light going over 60 miles per hour, and I have no time to react. I just see the headlights come in, boom, hits our passenger door. We were driving a minivan, right? And the impact was so powerful that our car literally tilted over like this. We were on two wheels for a couple seconds. And man, we've run through this process, but there could have been so many things that had gone wrong. We shouldn't have walked away from that accident with the minimal injuries that we had. I had a kink in my neck. My wife had some bruises and cuts. My kids literally had nothing wrong with them except maybe one bruise on a shoulder. And you know what, Jason, we were in the middle of praying the Chaplet of Divine Mercy right when that happened. And, as Catholics, you pray these prayers, right? You do these family devotionals, and you wonder what difference it makes sometimes. Yeah, you wonder how God receives our prayer and how he builds up the church or the world or the body of Christ. But I'll tell you, in that moment, we got a firsthand look at the power of prayer, where we really felt our Lord stand between us and that car, because the amount of damage that happened to the side of that car, the impact, all of the variables that happened. Like I said, so many things could have gone wrong, and they didn't. Even the guy who hit us, he walked away like nothing happened to him. And so there was just a lot of mercy covering us that night. And, I'm sure St. Joseph was there praying for us as well, and Our Lady. But God just extended our life.
Yeah.
He extended our days, and not only for me, but my children, and at the time, my unborn child. He wasn't even hurt either. And so we just consider it a huge blessing, a little extra time given to us in this world to do good, to seek him, to glorify him in our family. And we're just grateful, man. And Team Honda Odyssey for life.
Yeah. And Team Guardian Angel of the Kim family. It's funny. I think sometimes God just lets us see a physical manifestation of just the physical protection of himself, of the guardian angels, maybe to open up our eyes to we really have no idea how much spiritual protection we're getting from the angels, from the saints, because it's unseen. It kind of doesn't cross the radar, but protecting your family physically is actually not the main role of your guardian angel. It's something they do, but physical life is all eventually going to pass. And so his ultimate task is the spiritual protection of the Kim family. But I think sometimes God lets us see that the carnage that happened to your minivan, and then just the protection of your family. and then just imagine the spiritual assault that's against the Kim family, but then how all the heavenly host and Our Lady's mantle and everything is wrapping itself around you guys as you do God's work in the church. So
absolutely,
thank God we got you guys for a little bit longer in the church, as long as God wants you. It's a blessing for all of us.
Yeah, amen. Thanks, brother. And we'll talk about it in a little bit, but it's no coincidence that that was literally the day that my online course was launching. And not to say like I'm dropping this atomic bomb spiritually that's going to change the course of the world and the church, but at the same time, it's not surprising to me either that on the night that this course is going to launch, the enemy in all of his devious, is trying to throw curveballs and trying to take out my family via this guy who, isn't paying attention on the road, whatever, but here we are in the midst of all the setbacks and all the scary moments. God is there protecting us, guiding us, and helping us to bear fruit even through the suffering. And so if that was just the devil trying to get one last cheap shot in there to discourage us somehow, we're just marching on, and we're trusting that God is able to accomplish more in us and through us than we can imagine in Jesus.
That's awesome. Well, I know your course is going to do a lot of good work for the church. And so the course that you've created, we're going to take a look at that today of Catholic adulting. And, there's a whole lot of content in the course beyond what we can cover in a brief podcast interview kind of thing. But tell the listeners a little bit about not only like what the course is, but where did it come from? They say necessity is the mother of invention. And I think whenever I write a book or do some new product or project, I always feel deep in my heart like there's a need, there's an ache, there's a hole that needs to get filled in the church and the missionary work out there. And I feel like God's put it on my heart to do it. So maybe talk a little background, where'd this thing come from? And then what is it that you're giving to people through the course?
Absolutely. So the course is called A Catholic Guide to Adulting. The inception of it really was just this lingering problem that I saw in the church, which was when it comes to youth programs, youth outreach, there's tons of it, right? Parish to parish, diocese to diocese. There's a lot of things going on for high school youth, especially those preparing for confirmation. Catholic young adults, at the parish, we're having a young adult dance, ages 18 through 49.
Potluck.
With your aunties. It's like, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to get my donut and run, Yeah. There's not a whole lot of resource. I mean, there is and there isn't, right? I'm happy to say that, with the advent of technology and social media and a lot of these publication groups, et cetera, a lot of good is happening in the church where there's more resources for young adults. But when it comes to like a program, a rite of passage, formation that young adults are able to actively seek out in their parishes, they're few and far between, right? Some people, just because they're motivated, they might get hooked up into a program at the parish, or maybe the parish has a vibrant outreach for people in this phase of life. But overall, Jason, in my travels, not a whole lot. No. Not a whole lot. In my home diocese back in California, some events here and there, but really it's a Band-Aid. It's a Band-Aid to cover the wound of what is life? As a young adult, we're trying to figure out so many things. And obviously, a general rule of thumb is a young adult could be anywhere from ages 18 through 40, right? It depends on who you ask. If they're like 42, they'd be like, it's 43. I'm still young.
Yeah, I got one more in me.
I got this. But, in terms of the sage advice, the resources, the rite of passage to help young adults transition from, let's say, the moment they graduate from college. Granted, in college you can be a young adult as well, but you're still figuring out your major, your career path. What am I going to do in life? There's so many issues, Jason, from faith to finances to school to career to discernment to, God knows, so many different topics. And so I thought to myself, what kind of cohesive program is there for young adults to have this kind of formation? I couldn't think of anything. I couldn't. And so I'm like, okay, 2020 sucks. You suck, 2020. But here's the thing.
It's almost over, man.
A lot of events have been canceled. A lot of outreach has come to a screeching halt. All right, Lord, what do you want me to do here? Because I got to get creative, first of all, right, during this time to continue my mission that God has put in my heart. I also have to feed my family. I got to get really creative now. So I'm like, all right, online courses. This has been on the back burner. Never thought to do it because I always had too many excuses. I'm busy. I got to travel this weekend. I got this and that. And so a couple of friends encouraged me in this way. I kept praying and thinking about it. I said, you know what? It's time to execute. Let's go. And so essentially for the past number of months now, it's been about 3 to 4 months, I've been working hard to create a comprehensive course, a game-changing program for Catholic young adults, which prepares them not only for all these important subjects and topics of their young adulthood, but it helps them to avoid huge mistakes in the process. Because as you know, I mean, oftentimes it's a shot in the dark to figure out, how do I tackle these issues? Where do I go for this information? I mean, the internet, right? What a wonderful gift to humanity, right? But at the same time, there can be this information overload where it's like, where do I even look? There's like 1,000 different people saying different things. And so I wanted to create a resource that was authentically Catholic, taking from scripture, catechism, the lives of the saints, and also just the wise sage advice that I have received over the years. And frankly, even through some of my mistakes where I learned the hard way. And so each of these modules, it's a weekly process. It's kind of a go at your own pace. But there's also a community element where, praise God, Jason, we have over 225 members right now from over 12 different countries who have joined so far. And a lot of these members, we meet once a month. So we have Zoom calls once a month with this international crew of Catholic young adults. And we're able to have conversation, to go over the modules and things that we learned, what challenged us, and really just converse and encourage one another on this journey to Catholic adulting, right? And for those of you who haven't heard that term, adulting is simply like just a term that means all things adulthood, right? And obviously there's many challenges, but there's many beautiful solutions that our faith affords us. So every week's module has a video teaching from yours truly. There's an action point discussion section, which really firms up what you took. Because here's the problem, Jason, is so many people, they listen to great talks, great messages, great conferences, great homilies, whatever. And then what? What do you do with it, right? Knowledge is not power. It's only powerful when what? It's applied. When we were able to apply it into your life and begin bearing fruit from it. And so it was really important for me to not turn this into sort of like a Netflix thing where they just binge, or they just take what they want and then it doesn't do anything, right? So I challenged the course content to be dripped out a week at a time. So they're really able to sit with it. They're able to go through the action points and challenge themselves to begin applying the things that they learned into their walk of young adulthood that week. And I'm happy to say that it's been creating breakthroughs for all the over 225 members who have joined. It's really humbling to hear people sharing how, wow, Paul, I've never, thought of it this way. I've never thought to consider that. I never thought to consider, I need help in this issue in my life, or I need to address this problem in my relationship, or I need to think differently about how I consider my career path, because this is obviously not leading anywhere. And so it's been really cool, Jason, to journey with people and to see how the Lord is using this course. So that's kind of the gist of a Catholic guide to adulting.
No, that's awesome. Thank you for responding to God's call, putting that thing on your heart, and then just doing it. Because I know there's just such a gap in knowledge there. Not just, but so many people just didn't get that from their parents. Okay, now here's how to, put some money in your 401k. Here's how to, here's how to reboot, start up a car if the battery dies. Just so many practicals, from finances to picking a date to how to ask her out. I mean, just so much stuff. And just the nitty-gritty practical stuff that you're laying out is awesome. And, we don't have time to get in all this stuff, but a couple areas I wanted to hit on is, discernment and then dating and then married life. And so, start with just like the discernment piece. Just in your case, like, did you ever feel a call to the priesthood? How did you wrestle through that? I'm just curious personally, and then we'll dive into some more vocation questions. But did you ever wrestle back and forth?
Oh, yeah. I had my radical conversion in college when I was at UCLA in Southern California. And I was like, you know what? Girls are too much drama. I just want Jesus. I want the Lord. And so I said,
it's an authentic calling, yeah.
Right?
So I'll marry an entire parish instead, yeah.
So I actually transferred to Steubenville, my alma mater, and yours as well. And I joined the pre-theologiate program where I was discerning priesthood in the context of my undergraduate studies. After I graduated, I joined the Franciscan Friars, the renewal of the CFRs in New York City for about 3.5 years. So for about 3.5 years, I was a religious brother. I was living the life of prayer, of fraternity, and our mission, our outreach to evangelize into the poor. And it was a beautiful time in my life. And I said that phrase, rite of passage. I feel like in the church, sometimes there's a lack of this, right? Especially when it comes to discernment. Well-intentioned young adult Catholics, they might actively discern through their own prayer life and their efforts what their calling might be. But I think for the vast majority of young adults, they just move forward, move through the motions in life, right? I'm going to go to school, I'll graduate, I'll work, I'll date, la, 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 la. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. But say a person doesn't pump the brakes and say, hey, could God be calling me to something other than what I have planned? And so for me, that time in my life was actually a beautiful gift where I got to actively discern, where is God calling me? As you know, if you join a seminary or religious order, they don't make you take the first day you walk in. Just like it would be very unwise to ask someone to marry you after a date, right? I suppose in some cultures, arranged marriages, that's kind of how it works. But that's a different topic. But I think overall, it was a wonderful opportunity for me to really ask the question and to give it due diligence, right? And so even in my course, in our segment on discernment, there's a segment called Vocation and Purpose. I really challenge people to give their best effort, not just like whimsically or just like, oh God, could you be calling me? No, I still like girls. Okay, well, that's nice. You think that just because you like girls, you're not called? If you don't like girls, gentlemen, you have brain damage. It's like every priest that you ask, if you ask them, are women attractive to you? Of course they're going to say yes. A calling to the priesthood isn't a negation of the beauty of marriage or the call to desire to have a bride. Rather, it's an acknowledgement that this vocation is so beautiful, and yet the Lord is calling an individual to say, I am going to set my eyes on heaven now, right? Whenever we see a celibate priest or a sister, subconsciously we're thinking of heaven. We're thinking of eternal life. And why is that? St. John Paul in his Theology of the Body talks about this ontological call that everyone, regardless of your vocation, at the end of time, when we come into eternity, we're going to be married to the Lord, right? The Lord marries his bride, the church. And so Christ even talks about in the gospel, where in heaven we neither marry or give into marriage, but we're like the angels, right? In some sense, where we're wedded to the Lord. And so, Christopher West, who is one of the great contributors in our church to the Theology of the Body, he gave this example of marriage as like a sign pointing to a destination, right? The sacrament itself. And so, for instance, if you're driving down a highway and 50 miles from here is Austin, Texas, right? The sign is no longer necessary once you get to the destination. Well, marriage is pointing to the great wedding feast between God and his bride, the church. And so, anyways, I'm getting a little bit heady here, but needless to say, like when we see that vocation and we see the joy, and I know so many joyful priests, religious, sisters, brothers, who frankly, and I don't mean to be so blunt, but since you're talking about this, it's like it's clear that the purpose of their life is not sex because they're not having it, Yeah. Whereas our culture, YouTube, Netflix, like our world is so hypersexualized, thinking like, you are living in black and white. You're not living in high definition color. If you're not hooking up and shacking up this weekend, you're not sleeping around. And yet there's this inexplicable joy in the lives of these people who are foregoing sex for the kingdom. And it's such a contradiction. And so for me, it was necessary in my life to also consider, like, is there a calling in my life to serve God in a much more intentional way? And so I did my due diligence, I'd like to think, for about 3.5 years. And, through spiritual direction, through prayer, through living the life, ultimately it wasn't for me. And this is a whole nother topic in and of itself. But needless to say, going through that process helped me to understand that while I appreciated aspects of the life, I felt more called to do it as a layperson, as a married man. And so I'm very grateful to the Lord that he opened up an opportunity for me to do just that in my ministry, my calling as an evangelist, while being a husband and as a dad. So for all the young adults out there, my encouragement, is always do not be afraid to consider discerning, right? The disciples in the gospel said, Lord, where are you staying? And he said, come and see. right? So traditionally, the church invites people to do come and sees, whether that means visit a seminary or a religious community, or even just start the conversation with your pastor or vocation director in your diocese to begin wondering and praying about, could I possibly serve in this way as well? And one of two things will happen, as I always share with people. Either one, you'll find out you are called, and you'll be able to live a beautiful, fruitful life in that vocation, or you'll find out that you're not called, and then you'll be way better off for it. You know how many good Catholic women are lined up outside the walls of seminaries going, I want that guy right there. Because there's formation that a young Catholic man receives that perhaps a man who never went through that process didn't get to experience, right? How to pray, how to lead spiritually, how to seek the Lord, right? Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you, as the Lord tells us in the Gospel of Matthew. So I feel tremendously blessed. I'm not saying that like it perfected me, and here I was, the premier bachelor, but it was a blessing in my life to prepare me for my vocation now, where I would like to think that I'm way better off as a Catholic husband to love my wife and my children than if I didn't have that experience. So discernment's really, really important. And I think every good Catholic man, every good Catholic woman should at least ask the question, is God calling me to consider a vocation to the priesthood, religious life, etc.? So those are my 2 cents.
No, I love the example of what you did, because I think one of the most underused tools in discernment is action. Of just giving it a shot, because I think a lot of times we just want the feeling to go away, because there's that nag, maybe you're called, and we try to just bury it and shove it away. But I think God is going to leave that restlessness in us until we do something about it. And it doesn't mean that if you have that restless feeling that you must be called to the priesthood. No, but something needs to be clearly answered there for you to move forward into your vocation peacefully, whether it be married life or the religious life. And it's going to kind of sit there. And I think when we get that kind of burn the saddle feeling of just like, oh, am I supposed to discern? I don't know. We can have different responses. I mean, you talk about I think about the fight or flight response, but they say there's actually 4 now. I've heard there's fight, flight, fix, or freeze could kind of be the wrong reactions to a stressful event. So if you're feeling that call maybe to the religious life, priesthood, you could fight it. Like, no way, I'm not going to live there. No. Or you could flee from it. Just forget about this. I'm out of Dodge, or fix it. Okay, what do I need to do to get this thing to go away? Or just freeze. What am I supposed to do? I'm not going to go to the seminary. I'm not going to date, which I do. But like the action item that needs to be done is what you did, of just action. Like, give it a shot, see what happens. I mean, it's the quickest route to figure out what God is really calling you to. And then if you give it a shot, whether it be 3 months or 3 years, and not be your calling, I think that restlessness would go away permanently, of just like, you know what, I gave it my all, and it became increasingly clear, not just through my discernment, but through the discernment of my spiritual directors and others, that I did see some beautiful things in that calling, but it wasn't the calling that God was giving to me. Because sometimes we just presume, oh, God must want me for the priesthood because I'm a guy who prays. It's just like, well, no, don't just assume because the vocation, the true vocation is a gift. It's not a guilt trip. It's not a Catholic shame thing that if you didn't do it, you don't really love God fully. No, it's a gift he gives to you. And you don't want to presume that you've been given the gift. Rather, you want to act upon it if there's restlessness and see what comes to the surface. So what would you say are some just concrete things a Catholic young adult could do in terms of discernment? Priesthood, religious life, married life, daily choices. Like, what are some good how-to discernment tips that they can do to kind of take this restlessness and act upon it?
Right. I think the first and foremost, Jason, is universal holiness, right? Regardless of what our age is, ultimately what we're called to do. Over our vocation, we're all called to holiness in Christ. And so that really necessitates our prayer life. Are we praying daily? Are we living the rich sacramental life of the church? Not just on Sundays, but I dare say it, maybe even during the week. Even if the median age is 85, you can bring that average down at least 15 years by your presence, many of you. But, availing yourself to the gift of the sacraments. We're celebrating shortly the beatification of Carlo Acutis, 15-year-old just brainy from Italy who, was a video gamer, a programmer, and yet every single day he dragged himself, not just dragged himself, he ran to mass. He ran to mass, and his quote was, "The Eucharist is my highway to heaven." And as we can see in his life, it certainly was. Where in such a short time frame, 15 years, which is nothing, it's a blink of an eye, this young man attained the heights of sanctity. What a beautiful, beautiful example. And I love how he's just like buried in a tracksuit and jeans and a pair of Nikes.
Yeah. and he had a PlayStation. I mean,
just do it, But, Jason, the first thing is our prayer life, taking that seriously. It's not just something that's a part of our relationship with God. It is our relationship with God. It's our lifeline. And so sacraments, if you want to take it a step further, especially when it comes to your spiritual life, your walk, your vocation, your discernment, there's a sort of hidden, for those In-N-Out Burger fans out in the world, it's a pretty simple menu, and yet there's like a secret menu where you can ask for things that aren't there.
Double grilled animal style.
Spiritual direction. Exactly. Yeah. Spiritual direction is one of those hidden menu choices in the Catholic Church where essentially people can ask a priest or a pastor, sometimes a religious, or even lay people who are trained in it to be their spiritual director. And essentially this could mean like you meet once a month and you share things about what God is doing in your life. You have their assistance in helping you to see what might God be asking you to do in really any given situation. And so if a person is thinking, pondering, maybe they have this little nudge about a vocation, it would be good to begin meeting with someone. Now, every diocese typically has a dedicated vocations director whose mission it is specifically to journey with men and women who are asking this question. So figure out who that is and maybe set up an appointment. But really, there's a lot of fear sometimes because I think the number one thing, Jason, is there's just this fear that I might have to sacrifice something. I might have to deny myself the very natural, desirable thing of being married, right? Having a special someone in our life, raising a family. And, while I can't take the edge off of that kind of sacrifice, I will say this, that once again, from the many priests and religious I'm blessed to know personally, to have friendships with, their lives are filled with joy, and as you know, Jason, I can attest to as well. If you think marriage is some sort of cakewalk,
that's a great way to avoid mortification. Just get married. I mean, you're in the clear.
I'm going to be really blunt, Jason. If you think that the solution to all your problems in life is sex, you have something coming to you. Okay?
Yeah, surprise.
Surprise. You don't believe me? Watch Dr. Phil. Huh?
Yeah.
They should be happier. They're not.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because it's not the end all be all of our life is not the fulfillment of sexual desire. It's not this Freudian sort of fantasy solution. The solution that we're looking for, or the answer to the many questions in life, really goes back to the very simple understanding that St. John Paul was communicating to us all those years, that our lives do not make sense to the degree unless we make a gift of ourselves to others. And so it's in making a gift of ourselves, whether that does mean as a husband or as a wife, whether that does mean as a priest or as a religious, but it is in giving of ourselves that we receive not only the blessing of living a life that is full in Christ, but just, it just makes sense when we're being a blessing to others. And we're all hardwired that way. I'd like to believe that everyone watching this has done something kind for another human being in life. And when we do that, there's even this physiological reaction that happens. There's an endorphin shot to our brain. This is good. It is good to be good to others, Whereas if we do evil things, or we do things that might feel good momentarily, and yet there's this residual sort of remorse, that is also hardwired. And God is trying to lead us in a very simple, natural way to the meaning of our life, right? Perhaps even through trial and error, but nonetheless, we're all called to give of ourselves in that way, in love to God and to neighbor. And so, obviously we're all going to be called to a specific way to do that, as a single person, as a consecrated, or as a married person. Really, these are only the three main options here. There might be some like offshoots, but really those are the main three. But once again, overall is the universal call to holiness.
It's awesome. Now, so if someone does their due diligence, spiritual director, call to holiness, does all the discernment, it really feels that, okay, priesthood religious life is not where God's calling me. I'm not running away from it, but I just truly don't feel called to that. And they feel, okay, marriage is probably the one for me. And they go down the dating route. I mean, dating today is pretty darn confusing. Give us some, I want to drill you the couple things. One, just practical tips for modern dating. I want to take a look at how a guy can ask a girl out without being like creepy and sleazy. Then also how a girl can get a guy kind of out of the friend zone, make up his mind, and then some basic communication tips and stuff. But let's start with just practical tips for modern dating in a world of Tinder and swiping left and right and just trying to find a Catholic spouse who truly lives the faith. What are some good tips that you give, just practical tips for modern dating?
Okay, well, I will say this, and this kind of segues into my story. After I left religious life, I thought God owed me something, right? I'm like, God, I spent 3.5 years in a friar, so clearly you're going to send me a beautiful Catholic life. You owe that to me at least, right? And so I'm praying every novena, nothing. I'm walking into Mass during the weekday. I'm like, it's all old people.
Yeah, not her. Yeah.
I'm getting frustrated. Like many young adults. And as we know, God answers prayers in 3 distinct ways. Yes, no, and not now, right? Yes is great. We live for that yes. The no sucks, but the not yet, that's really frustrating because it's like, if not, then when? Okay. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was a process of really being patient because dating, I'm going to be real. Dating kind of stinks. Like, it's a very exhausting process for many people. And maybe for some people, it's a very positive, painless sort of process. But for me, and perhaps many young adults who are listening in, it can be very exhausting because you're putting yourself out there. You're going through the give and take of like calling, texting, getting to know a person, going on dates, wondering if it's working out, wondering if it's a good fit. Why aren't they calling? Why didn't they return my text? It's just like so much mental energy. And when it doesn't work out, you're like, what's the point? Right? Maybe I should just go on Tinder. It's like, no, don't do that. Don't ruin your life. Yeah. Don't go to the club, looking for a drunk future spouse. Not a great start. And it can be very challenging for many Catholic young adults to stay in the game, if you will, of God's call to purity and holiness, right? In the midst of that. My thought is, one, as we have this season of singlehood, what a wonderful gift of time it is to use that time well, to consider how can I stop complaining about my singleness every day to God and rather ask the Lord, if he's writing my love story, then he's trustworthy with that. One of my favorite books in the Bible is the book of Tobit, which is really like, that was like the first Catholic match. Well, at the time it was Jewish match. It was Israel match. But nonetheless, you have this wonderful story of a prayer, of a heartfelt prayer, this longing of Tobit to have his son Tobiah find a good wife. And meanwhile, Tobiah was just like ready to find his bride. And meanwhile, there's this poor girl whose 7 husbands have been slaughtered by like this demon who's jealous over her. It's really a great read. It's very for the Lord of the Rings fan, Harry Potter. I mean, it really fits in. It's just a wild little book in the Old Testament. But you see how God hears the prayer and the longings of these young people, these young adults, and eventually through the intercession of Saint Raphael, an archangel, they're led to meet and eventually, live a beautiful life based on God's love. So prayer, surrendering it to the Lord, as hard as that is, not giving into the temptation to settle. There's a real temptation, I think, in the dating space to grasp after, I want this to work. I really like this person. I don't want to be single. I don't want to be lonely. I don't want to be that person at the family gathering and the aunts are always saying, why are you still single? It's like
a lot of fun there.
A lot of pressures, Yeah. And the danger, of course, is that when we grasp and we try to fit, a wood peg into a circular, or like, a shape that doesn't fit, or making it work on our time frame instead of God's, then it can lead to a lot of regret and a lot of remorse, a lot of mistakes. Um, and so for any single young adults out there, I know it's tough, but if God is trustworthy in all the areas of your life, all the big areas like salvation, eternal life, then he knows well the plans he has for you, as he says in Jeremiah, plans not to harm you, but to prosper you for a future and a hope. And why wouldn't your love story be included there? So really praying for your future spouse, but also praying that you prepare yourself to be the best spouse possible in the future. When it comes to the dating scene itself, obviously we can use modern technology. There are some dating sites out there. Obviously Tinder would not be one of the ones I'd recommend, just because of its nature of sadly its reputation precedes it to be sort of this hookup app. But there are sites like Catholic Match, Catholic Singles. There are other ones that are secular, but you can meet people of faith on there, like Coffee Meets Bagel. There are many different sites out there. Obviously, the most organic way to possibly meet a good candidate for a future spouse or someone to date is through families, but it doesn't always work out. Or if there's a young adult group in your diocese or in your area, it's a great place to get to know people. But really, it can work in so many different ways. There's not a one size fits all. But needless to say, preparing yourself, creating a non-negotiables list, I think is important, because once again, people can get desperate. And so they go on missionary dating mode, They go on focused dating mode, where they're going to go and evangelize their future, this boyfriend or this girlfriend. And there's a lot of red flags, but they're like, no, God's grace can cover it. I can change them. Yeah, no, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't. Sadly, Jason, I've heard of this many times where people get into marriages thinking that, oh, they'll change for me, and they don't. And so they take the route of Saint Monica, who for many a decade prayed and fasted and wept for the conversion of her own husband and children. And while that did lead to her sanctity, I'm sure she would have in some sense appreciated if that cross wasn't so heavy to bear. So not settling, not getting desperate, but also I hear it a lot. I hear it a lot in my travels, especially from good Catholic women, single, beautiful ladies. And they're like, Paul, where are all the good Catholic guys? They're not here. They don't live here in my neighborhood. They're all awkward. They don't know how to have a conversation. They don't ask me out, even though I know they're interested. They have no social skill, no swag, no personal hygiene, no fashion sense. And they're walking up going, hey, do you like the Saints? Like, nothing wrong with the Saints. Something wrong with that presentation,
Feeling you. I think a lot of young ladies out there, unfortunately, are feeling the pain there. So let's say you got one of these girls, Catholic girl. She's enjoyed that season of singleness. It's getting a little old, but she's savoring it, serving God in it, trusting Him, pursuing her prayer life. She's checked out some of the Catholic apps, Catholic Chemistry, Catholic Match, Catholic Singles. Quite hasn't been able to find what she's looking for there, but there's a guy. She's involved in her, young adult community, and he seems like he's into her, but then he doesn't seem to be making the move. It seems like they're moving the direction, but he's kind of dragging his feet, and so she feels like she's kind of paralyzed in this little friend zone with this guy who, like, okay, is he afraid to ask me out because I'll reject him, or is he really just not interested? Like, what the heck is going on? So if you've got that girl, you got that situation, what can she do? Because a lot of girls like, well, I don't want to be the girl to just ask him, like, dude, what are your intentions? Make up your mind. Tell me what you're thinking. Ask me out. What does she do when she feels kind of stuck in that little place? What would you recommend to help her to kind of crowbar him out of the friend zone to make up his mind?
Yeah, that's a tough one, Jason. In an ideal world, this young man would have enough sense in his brain to say, okay, I like her, she like me. Yeah. Cute girl, ask out, right? Yeah. That in an ideal world, that's what he would do. But, for all the ladies out there, if you want to understand something about the male psyche, our universal fear oftentimes is the fear of rejection, fear of failure. And so naturally there's this big pressure that we're kind of weighing in our minds of, if I ask her out, but she says no, I'm a worthless sack of, and there's all sorts of colorful things that people can associate with their self-worth and value. But really, there is a fear that if I do put my neck on the line and I ask this girl out, what if she says no, right? I'd rather just have this awkward, non-defined relationship with her so as to avoid the commitment of possibly being rejected, showing her my true feelings and intentions. Just understand that for guys, we can be a little thick-headed for these reasons. But I will say, as a girl, there are ways to let the guy know that you are interested. While I'm not saying you need to go and smack him and say, hey, let's go out on a date, though probably the guy would appreciate it because it'd be like, whoa, that's one less thing I had to deal with. If only the girls would ask us, oh, cool. Yeah, you don't want to emasculate. Another topic to talk about, but I will say there are ways in your body language, in your tone of voice, in just your interactions with him that can help get the message across. Now, I'm not telling you to slobber all over him, that sort of thing, but there's ways to look at him and smile and really pay attention, saying, if you find him decently funny, then, laugh at his jokes. And there are ways to let him know verbally and non-verbally that you are interested, right? And this is important because, as men, we need some sort of affirmation that there is at least a level of attraction that's being reciprocated to us. That helps our confidence and our ego a little bit. Now, beyond that, if you're kind of stuck in the Bermuda Triangle of the friend zone where, you never leave and you're never found, I would say that there's no harm and no foul in also sharing how you feel to this guy. While I'm not saying you need to ask him out, I don't think there's a problem with you saying, hey, can we chat for a second? I noticed that there's, an attraction between us. Can you let me know where you're at? What are your intentions? Because I don't want to be wasting time. I don't want to be dragged around here. What are your intentions? And you know what? It's not ideal, but it's something. It can be a bridge builder between this young man staying stuck and finally having enough guts to tell you how he feels. So sometimes even if it's in that mode of it's not going anywhere, it's in the friend zone, I don't know what this relationship is, I think that can be helpful at times to the guy to really challenge him and say, look, there's an attraction. We're spending a lot of time together. What are your intentions? And I think that might jumpstart at least his cowardice, laziness, thick-headedness to at least say, oh yeah, I like you. Can my mom ask you out for me? No.
Well, I asked your friend to ask you if you liked me, but I haven't gotten the note back, But to me, it's a win-win. As hard as that conversation is, it's a win-win. And by that, I mean, if the guy explains, I just like hanging out, but I don't really want to date because I'm scared of commitment. It's like, hey, great. At least you know where this guy stands. So you don't need to waste the next 9 months of your life clogging up your love life with a guy who's unwilling to take any risk or make a gift of himself. Whereas if you do put yourself out there and he says, yeah, I have, I'm sorry, I just haven't been cleared. Yeah, let's go on a date Saturday. Either you end up with a date or you end up with clarity, either of which is better than being uncertain and alone. And so to me, it's worth that tough conversation because I think some guys are afraid of the rejection. Some guys who are even kind of more scary are afraid she's going to say yes. Because if then she says yes, what if someone better comes along 3 weeks from now? And so these type of guys, it's kind of like chastity. You want to bring it to the surface sooner rather than later, because if that's a deal breaker for him, then the sooner you know that, the better more effectively and efficiently you can head off in the opposite direction. And so don't be afraid to have these difficult conversations. And yeah, it might feel a little bit awkward, but it's not like Paul said, you're not throwing yourself at this guy begging for his attention. You're just asking for a little bit of clarity, which is not too much to ask. And so if it's fair for the girl to do that, the guy's side, what can the guy do to pursue her? Because look, men are really simple creatures. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't know if there's been many girls in my life who I've really been attracted to, really been interested, who've sent me signals that they were interested too, and they weren't dating anybody else that I didn't pursue. I mean, if the feeling is mutual there, the pursuit tends to be natural if the guy's worth anything. Because like girls don't even want to date a guy who's not willing to take any risk to begin with. But let's say you got a guy and he wants to pursue her, a little bit nervous. No, his dad didn't really sit him down and say, okay, here's how to pursue a woman, to discern, to pursue her with sincerity, to commit to her with clarity. Didn't have a dad that kind of ran him through all that stuff. He never bought the dating blueprint book at chastity.com. And so he's not sure exactly, how do I ask this girl out? So how does a guy do it, nuts and bolts, without being creepy or sleazy or weird or scaring her away? Like, how can he ask her out? What would you recommend?
I have a couple of proven methods that have a 100% success rate. You say things like, hey, my name's Will, God's Will.
She's in the boat.
Hey, it's really loud here. I know a quiet place in Adoration Chapel down the street. You want to go pray?
Hey, that'll work.
It could work. That's how I met your mother. It could work, but oftentimes maybe it won't. I think here's the thing. I sat down with a friend of mine, a college student, really great guy. And he said, Paul, look, like I've seen you speak before. You seem really confident. You know how to communicate. I am deathly afraid of, talking to strangers, bringing up conversation. I said, wow, thank you for sharing that with me, Chris. You're not alone. There's a lot of people out there who are afraid of social settings, of putting themselves out there, getting to know new people, and especially strangers, let alone the opposite sex, right? And so I said, here's your homework this week, man. I want you to go and purposefully talk to strangers. Not if you're a kid, don't take the candy, don't talk to strangers, but really like going up to a stranger, whether that's the person checking out your food at the grocery store, or, if you're on a university campus, just walking up to someone and just striking up conversation. And it's going to feel really awkward, and that's okay. That's pretty normal. But I think if you go in there with some sort of a conversation starter, and so the homework portion, Jason, before we even get to the asking out, is just getting comfortable, being able to really engage in the art of conversation. I think a lot of people have been stunted in their ability to do just that because of our stinking phones, right? We're so dependent upon texting and really these like cheap, easy ways to communicate that we've lost the ability to really have conversations in real time, to confidently approach someone, ask an open-ended question, listen to their response, think about the next thing that you would say that relates to the previous thing, and the give and take, the ebb and flow, the body language. People don't know how to do this. It can literally be as simple as, one, taking my course, A Catholic Guide to Adulting, where I cover this topic, or even just figuring it out just through trial and error. So one, I told this guy, look, go out there and talk to people on campus. And you know what? He stuck to it. He did it every day. And by a couple of weeks, he was like, thank you so much. I'm like, I feel much more confident. I feel like I'm not this failure who has nothing to like give to other people that is interesting. And if you don't feel like a very interesting person, that's okay. Just learn some interesting things that you can share with others, That's essentially our life as speakers. Amen, Jason. Yeah. Sadly to say, sometimes it's just regurgitating the things that we've heard that have helped us. This is our life. This is our mission and vocation. It's like nothing really is new in some sense, but we take it from the perspective and experience of our life and who we are, and we share ourselves with others. And so learning how to overcome that social awkwardness that sometimes people feel. It's okay to feel awkward. But in order to become confident, you have to work against the awkwardness. Just like the virtue of courage. It doesn't mean that you don't have any fear. It means that the fear is there, and yet you push through the fear and you do the noble task anyways. And the same thing goes for maybe the social dilemma of I feel weird in social settings. When it comes to the attraction that you have to a girl, I'm not saying you have to walk up to a complete stranger who you think is attractive, but you could. And you might miss all the opportunities where you don't take advantage of that. Say you're at a young adult event at church and you see a really cute girl and she happens to be going to daily mass. So you really know she's like already just quality in terms of her prayer life. Like she takes it seriously. And you see her, you've smiled a couple times, but you didn't have the gusto to like walk up to her, But once again, learning to go up and introduce yourself, not in a creepy like pickup line kind of way, but like, hey, I noticed you come here often. My name's Paul. What's your name? It's like, it's cool that like we're bringing the average age down like a couple decades. She laughs and you keep having a conversation. Where do you go to school? I go here. And at the end of the conversation, right, assuming that there is a good conversation, a vibe that was positive, you could even dare say this: hey, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I think you're a really beautiful person. I'd love to get to know you more. Could I take you out on a date for some coffee? Right? And that can strike fear in the heart of a young man, right?
Wait, did you say the word date?
I said date. I didn't say marriage. I didn't say
Shouldn't you just
out.
say we should hang out or get together sometime or chill?
Well, here's the problem, and this is really
What
important.
if you let her know what you're thinking? That's too much. You have to leave it open-ended. I thought to be incredibly vague. Isn't that what a woman wants? A lack of clarity and intentionality?
Yeah, like grade school where you just like jump kick her, throw like rocks at her to let her know that you like her,
Yeah.
No, that's assault. You will be arrested. Yeah, Jason, it's so important to let a girl know that you are upfront, that you are confident and courageous enough, really. And girls appreciate that. When a guy knows what he wants, he has vision, direction, and he takes action, right? Women actually appreciate this. So to let a girl know, like, look, I think you're beautiful. Like, I'd love to get to know you more. Can I take you out on a date? Like, there might be a little, what's the word? Embarrassment. But at the same time, I don't think any woman on this planet would take that offensively unless she were just an offensive individual who is creepy. But if this is in the context of a normal conversation, I mean, what's the worst thing that this girl could say? No, you ugly son of a mother. Right? I mean, if she takes that path, that's not the type of girl you want to be with. So consider yourself blessed. You dodged a bullet there, right? The worst thing a girl could say is, oh, no, thank you, or I'm dating, or I'm discerning religious life because I heard Paul speak, and whatever, And if that's the case, it's like, no worries, I respect that. Have a great day. You walk away. That's it, right? Cry by yourself in your room, not in front of her, okay? Have some dignity, have some self-worth, right? But if she says, oh, yeah, sure, you say, could I have your number, right? Really simple. Write the number. Nice meeting you, and I look forward to calling you a little bit later this week, right? Simple as that. And you miss every shot you don't take. I can't tell you how many times as a single guy who was just wanting so badly to date, like I would see a beautiful, attractive Catholic girl and I wouldn't do anything because I was afraid. I was afraid to make action. I was afraid to be rejected. I was afraid that she might think I was weird. And guess what? I missed every opportunity. Not to say God didn't work it out. I have a beautiful wife who eventually, when I did meet her, it was at my friend's wedding reception. I was emceeing at the time, and I was doing my whole spiel, and she was laughing at my corny jokes. So, I was like, oh, I must talk to her before the night is over. She likes my jokes, right? And so, I went up to her, and my opener line was, I introduced myself, and I noticed she had like a tattoo on her shoulder. So I said, hey, can you tell me the story behind your tattoo, right? That was my opening line. Not creepy, pretty creative. And, the rest is history. We danced, we had a good time, and, I got her number and called her up, and we had an epic first date, and the rest is history, right? I mean, there's more to it than that, but that's the general gist. But had I not talked to her, I was just like in the back going, oh, she's way out of my league. They're all out of my league. They're all out of your league. It's okay. But you Google search celebrity women, they're like married to nerdy guys. Welcome to the club. Yeah, So
basically, you should just go up to a woman and let her know that you've been staring at her bare skin from behind, and then that should do the trick. That's the line you're.
Well, Jason, if you say I've been staring at your bare skin, she's going to be like, "Ill, you're a freak," right? There are ways to say things.
You gotta nuance that, yeah. So, I remember I read recently this guy. He had never asked anybody out, and he was, I think, in his late 20s or maybe even early 30s, and getting over pornography addiction and kind of leaving that lifestyle of like, hey, all these flawless supermodel porn stars never say no to me, but I'm scared to death to actually ask a real woman yes or no. And so he always kind of lived in this emasculated state, and was getting some counseling, really working through that. And his counselor recommended, ask a girl out. You're breaking free from this stuff. You're moving forward. Ask a girl out. And he went ahead and did. And he asked the girl out, and she said no. And he went back in his car, and when she wasn't around, and he was like, yes, yes. And he celebrated the fact that he did it. Not that he got the yes, but he finally had the guts to ask. And so that in itself is an achievement, just to be able to have the guts to ask. Because I remember one girl saying, she said, look, guys, the easier it is to ask a lady out, the easier it is for the lady to say no. And so when it's that face-to-face, you're not guaranteed a yes, but there's an achievement in at least having flattered a woman to let her know that you're interested in her. And then you end up, as I said, with clarity. And so let's say he gets the clarity. She says yes. It's two last questions on dating. Practical tips in terms of the dating relationships. How do you keep chastity alive in a dating relationship? Because as you get closer, you have that desire for union. How do you hold off on the desire for physical union in order to grow in that spiritual, and emotional union until the time is right in marriage for the physical union? So how do you practice chastity? As time goes on, it's only going to get more challenging.
Jason, it's true. It's a very normal, actually beautiful thing. It's a desire for union with someone who you are attracted to, you care for, and naturally, as you said, as the dating relationship moves forward, in fact, very early on, there's going to be this very intense desire to make oneself a gift. Now, therein lies the challenge, because prior to the wedding vows, if you haven't made that lifelong commitment, then the sexual act becomes a lie, right? Because when a couple is having sex, they're essentially saying to one another, whether they're saying it verbally or spiritually or not, I give everything to you. I hold nothing back. It's all yours. And this is something that is safeguarded only within the institution of marriage as God created it. And so naturally, it's a challenge. Because as soon as you start dating, especially as for us guys, where the arousal curve is very high, it's easy for us to go from 0 to 60 within like a look, or even holding hands at times. And certainly if a man or a woman has been hooked on pornography, then this complicates the situation even more. Because what is a very natural, beautiful way of relating and showing affection now has a whole nother layer of temptation and muck to wade through. And so I would say that some practicals are, look, keeping Christ in the center of your relationship, praying together, creating healthy boundaries. So naturally, if a couple who wants to be chaste, spends their Friday night laying down together, watching a movie in bed, it's going to be really, I wouldn't bet that night would be left without any remorse or regrets. I wouldn't, that would be a very unwise investment option there, at least in my mind. We can't play stupid. All right. Naturally, if we place ourselves in situations where we're going to be physically aroused, where, there's just too much PDA, not even public, it can be just in the quiet of a room or a dorm or an apartment, whatever, if we cross certain healthy boundaries that, frankly, we should have maybe had a conversation about before we even got there. And this is also an important point, is defining the relationship, but also defining the boundaries. I like you. I care for you. I love you. You love me. Sex is for marriage. Let's honor that. Let's honor God and our bodies. Let's honor the fact that until we get married, there's no guarantee that we will be married to one another. So I wouldn't want someone to use my future spouse and vice versa, right? So let's do each other the honor of avoiding situations, right? Maybe it's too much of a temptation to be alone. Date in public. Go on double dates, right? Date with accountability, where you're not just in a room alone. How far is too far? Probably what you wouldn't do in public in front of other people. It's probably too far, unless you're in Vegas.
Yeah.
But anyways,
you're already too far.
Yeah, you're already too far. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas wrong. You can still get an STD and bring it home, Yeah. But defining the relationship, defining the boundaries so as to protect one another's hearts. A really practical thing is even just something like kissing, making out. If you extend a certain length and duration of kissing, once again, you're asking for trouble. I don't mean to get into the nitty gritty, but if you start French kissing, you're already like priming your brain and your bodies to say, okay, it's going to go a step further. So once again, avoiding certain situations that will lead you to temptation or a lot of frustration, right? Which might eventually lead to sin that you don't want to engage in with this boyfriend or girlfriend in your life. So yeah, I think that's really important. Just defining the relationship, defining the boundaries. And if you happen to unfortunately cross one of those boundaries, which could very well happen, it doesn't mean that your relationship is over, you need to break up. But what it does require, I believe, is a heartfelt conversation at that point. Hey, we went too far there. I didn't feel comfortable with that. Let's avoid that. Let's talk about this, right? Let's even go to confession together. Let's be really intentional about protecting one another. I think that's very important because, we don't have to get into it, but, there's a lot of consequences to not having these conversations. There are many, many consequences that are very negative, from unprepared, unplanned pregnancies where you're just not ready for it, to STDs, to ultimately broken hearts. These are not things that God intended when He, put this attraction in people's hearts. He wants you to have a relationship and a love that doesn't lead to regrets or remorse, but leads to joy and freedom and peace. And so, just an encouragement to everyone out there who's fighting the good fight, who wants to do this the right way, the old-fashioned way, the Captain America kind of way. There's nothing wrong with old-fashioned. I don't know when that got a bad rap. I think a tree by its fruits. And so I think, unfortunately, with our culture being so hypersexualized, a tender sort of generation of just hooking up, there's so much emptiness, there's so much hurt, there's so much remorse. And this is not what we were created for. We were created for more. And so, fight the good fight, stay in there, be wise, don't be dumb.
It's kind of crazy that people even talk about chastity as being old-fashioned, as if promiscuity is a modern invention. Like, oh yeah, I think they came up with that in the 90s, didn't they? I was like, no, read the Old Testament. Like, this has been a problem a long time. I mean, promiscuity is old-fashioned, and I think something I often point out when I'm talking to like the high school kids, they're asking like, well, isn't chastity really hard? And I'm like, no, like really not. What's really hard is unchastity. Unchastity is so much harder than chastity. Because I said, think about it. I was speaking at high schools last week in Alabama, and after the talk, I went to the high school classrooms. We went to, the freshman class, then over to the junior morality class, and the seniors. And we're doing these Q&As, and this question came up, and, I just invited some of the students to think, okay, let's imagine a girl at a party a couple weeks ago. There are two girls, one practiced chastity, one did not. Maybe at the moment of the party, it might have been hard for the girl being chaste. Like, oh, it seems like everybody else is having that. But right now, look at the two girls. Look at the one that's practicing chastity. What is she worrying about? She's worrying about her math test, tomorrow afternoon. What is the girl who's unchaste worrying about? She's worrying about her pregnancy test, tomorrow morning. Like, who's having the harder day here? The girls that wondering, like, am I getting used? Is that a guy even going to text me again? Am I going to get a disease? I feel guilty. Like, I'm sorry, like no matter what you live, you're going to pay a price. So you might as well pay a price that's actually going to be an investment instead of shredding your money and think you're going to get more cash at the end. And so let's say you've got a couple that they've done their discernment. They've, had a good chaste relationship. They've had their struggles, but it seems that God's really calling to marriage. Now it's time for engagement. Any practical pointers on engagement itself in terms of the timing of it? How long should it be? Are you in favor of 9-year engagements? Different things like that. What would you say?
9-year engagements. It's too long. These are great questions. I think, Jason, there's a wise and healthy way to discern. And obviously, the less sexually active the relationship is, the more clarity a couple is going to have. Getting sex involved in a dating relationship is really going to cloud people's judgment and best judgments of, is this person in my life actually someone I could see myself marrying? A great rule of thumb that I've heard before is if you had, for the girls, the great question is, if you had a future daughter, would you want your future daughter dating or marrying a guy like the one you're dating now? If your gut reaction is, hell to the nah, 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 then there's your answer, But I'll tell you what, you're sleeping around with this guy, it's going to be really hard to get past the bond, the emotional, spiritual, sexual bond that you've created by crossing that boundary. And the same goes for guys. And so, just really striving for chastity can help you discern, being aware of red flags. What are some red flags to look out for? Is this person very possessive and controlling of you? Do they try to keep your family and close friends away from the relationship? Is there any substance abuse? Is there any addiction problems? Is this person addicted to pornography? Is there anything that worries you about your ability to overcome any sort of conflict, right? Is this person physically or emotionally abusive or manipulative? These are red flags. These are flags that you need to not ignore, but to really ask the question, what is going on here? I need to bring this up to this person. I need to think and pray about this. Because you do not want to ignore these things and then get committed to a person like this in marriage only to come to find out this is what you're going to live with for the rest of your life or however long the marriage will last, right? And so really being aware, being mindful of any of these sorts of red flags, don't neglect them, talk to people, include your family. Include your family and your close, trusted friends in the discernment process. If they bring up any concerns that they have about this person in your life, I know it can be very easy to get offended or triggered by this sort of like criticism. But listen, if they're speaking in your best interest and they love and they care for you, then you should at least consider, okay, what is the feedback here? Sit with it, pray about it, and then move forward or have the conversation. And once you get to that point where you've been dating for a while, perhaps even you've had an argument or two at least. And why is this important? I studied marriage and family therapy, Jason, and being married people, we can attest just off the cuff. Marriage takes a lot of work, and naturally one of the most difficult aspects of marriage is having conflict and resolving it in a healthy way. Right? Because marriage doesn't cure all of it's not this medicine that cures all of your pains and longings and misunderstandings. Rather, marriage especially brings all these issues to the surface, as dating. And so the question too to ask is, have we had an argument about something? How were we able to work through that? How did that go? Okay. And if it was unhealthy, if it was a knockdown, drag out, yelling match, if it was like also a red flag to consider, hey, maybe we need to talk about this. Maybe if we're invested, we really care about each other, it wouldn't even hurt to meet with a pastor, a mentor, or even a couples counselor. You don't even have to wait to be married to go to couples counseling to address some of these issues that are coming up. And you're doing this why? Why all this effort? You're doing it ultimately to set yourself up for success, to set yourself up with a healthy foundation so that when you're ready to make that lifelong commitment and plunge, look, engagement is not about one day, The reception hall, the caterer, the colors of the flower. This is not what we're preparing for. We're preparing for the most important journey, one of the most important journeys of our life, our vocation. Okay. So the irony, of course, is that while seminarians get 6-7 years of full-time formation to prepare for the most important vocation choice in their life, couples, date, have feelings, talk about it, meet with your pastor 4 times, go on a lousy retreat. Okay, good luck. It's like, Oh. We need to really do this wisely. And this is, once again, one of the reasons why I created this course, A Catholic Guide to Adulting. We have a section on dating. We have a section on marriage. We have a section on mental health. Just a personal checklist on what do I need to address in my own life so that I can be the best X, Y, and Z that I'm being called to be. In terms of the practical, obviously if you're the guy and you've gone through this checklist and you realize this is a good girl, you prayed about it, you feel the peace and the blessing of the Lord upon you, then go in it. Just like it was hard to ask her out, it's going to be hard to ask her to marry you. But at the same time, you can go forward with confidence, knowing that indeed, if this is what you're called to do, it's going to work out for your good. Okay. So, don't do it in public in front of the Chick-fil-A. Put some effort into making it romantic.
Absolutely. And one thing I think it often gets overlooked is make sure you're the one who's making the choice to ask her out. Meaning it's not, I did a novena and I saw this and therefore I'm going to make this choice because I got that answer in the novena. Hey, novenas are great. I just don't think they're a substitute for discernment. Don't ask. I mean, you want your parents' input, obviously. You want to tap into that wisdom, but don't let anybody decide for you because otherwise, when the storms come, then you're going to want to back out because like, well, I chose this because of my parents. I chose this because of God. I chose this because of that. Right. In the end, you must choose. You got to own that decision. And so let's say you own the decision, you make the plunge, you get married, and then the storms come, the conflict, the fighting, this, that. A lot of people can be obviously shell-shocked because they're like, oh, wait a minute. I thought we'd be living the theology of the body. And, and then the experience, just the cross that marriage is. What would you say, just concrete tips, how do you resolve conflict with a spouse in a marriage? For people who maybe haven't had a lot of conflict resolution skills, my wife and I actually went to a marriage retreat this past week. It was like a marriage workshop you do online virtually, and they're given different conflict resolution skills. And we're going through this workbook, and they say, okay, one of the first points that you need to know when you're going through conflict resolution is let go of objective reality. And I did, what any reasonable husband would do on the Zoom call. I laughed out loud. Now, thankfully, I was muted, so nobody heard the laughter. But in my brain, it's like, wait a minute, what? Like, you're going through an argument, and the first thing you need to do is let go of objective reality. And, I'm like, no. Like, objective reality is the point, so that you can convince the other of your facts. That way, it's productive, like a presidential debate, right? Where, you can say what you're thinking, and you'll absorb the other person's viewpoint.
Not true.
Yeah. So, but it was just like, okay, wait a minute. I haven't thought about this, that, okay, I need to let go of objective reality. If she's saying, you always, you never, you did this for 12 hours. And I'm like, oh, no, it was 8.5 hours. And it's not always because there was that exception. You get so hung up on fact checking that you're not listening. All you're doing is formulating a rebuttal while they're speaking. Right. And this isn't listening, this is debating. And it doesn't work. So what would you say in terms of like, okay, practical tips, conflict resolution, husband and wife, they love each other, but, they're not seeing eye to eye. How do they work through those things to create more light than heat?
Yeah, I think once again, like in the committed relationship of marriage, you have made a lifelong promise to not only one another, but to God, right? That in good times and in bad, you would love one another. And so here we are, right? Here's that line in those vows. These are bad times, or this is a bad moment, or this is a rough patch in your marriage. In the experience that I've had being a counselor in the past, what was very obvious to me, being a third party looking into this very heated situation between a husband and a wife, was that beyond all the emotions, behind all of the conflict, there was just very simple needs that were not being met. Very simple needs, right? It's not like, well, I need $1 million and I need it's nothing like superficial. It came down to very basic needs like, I want to feel like I'm being heard. I want to feel like you are proactively doing things that remind me that you love me. Just basic stuff, fundamental stuff. I want to know that I am loved. In the heart of every man and woman, there is this desire. They also say that, for husbands, there is this universal desire to know that they are respected. For the woman, it's this universal desire to know that she's cherished. It can be both for both genders, but those are kind of these universal desires. And so behind every conflict, there's actually a very basic need. So going into these moments, guns blazing, you're a blank, you're a this, this is not ideal. Just like the presidential debates, it's not conducive communication. I think most people will agree on either platform, either party. In a married relationship, you ride or you die together. There's no winner and loser. You're either both winners or you're both losers. Okay. And so that having been said, if you are a team, then you better find out real quick how to be a team, even when there is conflict. And so a very practical idea, Jason, is, say a husband or a wife has, a complaint, an issue, a hurt, something on their heart that's bothering them. Rather than going in there saying, you're a worthless piece of, or you always do this, you're criticizing. You can just start. A simple template to use is, hey, do you have a minute to chat? You sit down, right? Make sure you have each other's attention, TV's off, whatever. Hey, when you did blank, or when you said blank, it made me feel blank, right? This is an easy to use template. When, for example, hey, when you made that comment about my family, it made me feel hurt. I was offended. Okay. Notice something. You're just objectively, I don't know what that marriage Zoom thing you were on was about, but you are objectively identifying like the action or the statement or the inaction that is causing you to feel the way you do. And you're not blaming them for it. Like, you're not criticizing them or getting down on them, harping on them. It's just, when you said this or when this happened, it made me feel negatively. Right. And this is a less aggressive way of just bringing your feelings to the table. This is how I feel because this is what happened. And granted, there might be some defensiveness, there might be some misunderstanding, or some more description that needs to happen to really help the other party understand. But you're not doing it in a way where you're trying to undercut the other person, chop them down, or call them names or this sort of thing. There's a couple in the world of psychology, Dr. John and Julie Gottman, his wife, and they are the foremost experts on marriage. They have, over the past number of decades, been able to determine with over 90% accuracy the couples that they mate who will have a successful marriage and who will end up in divorce. Over 90% effective rate just by videotaping them and showing the interactions of how they respond to one another in the counseling session. But they talk about the 4 deadly horsemen in the book of Revelation. They're the 4 deadly horsemen who come with the apocalypse. But in marriage, they describe the 4 deadly horsemen, and they are criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. Let me say that again. It's criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. Criticism is, just like I was showing you the example of, you are a worthless piece of, you always do this, you're only capable of this, I blah, 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 right? Criticism. What is defensiveness? I never do that. I don't do anything wrong. This is you, like, you're doing it, right? So in criticism, you're blasting another person for, your discontent. Defensiveness, you're not taking any sort of accountability. You're just kind of evading or putting it back on them. Stonewalling, what is that? Stonewalling is this. One spouse is coming at them. Hey, when you said this, it made me feel like this. Put that wall up. Wakanda forever. You have that energy field. I don't hear you anymore. I am detaching myself from reality in this conversation, right? It's like stonewalling, very unhelpful to resolving the conflict at hand. And then the worst horseman that they identified is contempt. That's when an attitude of contempt has entered into the relationship, where there is a general lack of respect now that has poisoned the interaction. This is very, very dangerous, where once that respect is gone, it's only a matter of time now till the whole thing comes crashing down. And so, according to the Gottmans, it's really important that every couple identifies in their interactions with one another, what are the deadly horsemen that maybe I fall victim to? Maybe I have a tendency to criticize. Maybe I have a tendency to be really defensive when someone's coming to me with a genuine complaint. Maybe I stonewall because I can't handle the conflict. Or maybe I just have this looming contempt for my significant other. These are all very, very dangerous things, and they have to be checked at the door. Otherwise, it will lead to an unhealthy situation in a marriage. Mm. And so I think even these tips of identifying what's there, being able to, once again, bring up your feelings, learning how to, in a very safe way. I mean, I hate to use the term, but kind of like a safe space, Because ultimately, the couple, when there's a conflict, it's a very simple need that's not being met, as I said before. If they can learn how to communicate that need without criticizing, being defensive, stonewalling, and being holding contempt for one another, the better off they're going to be in resolving it. And what I have found, thanks be to God, and I'm a young blood, I've only been married 7 years now, but every time my wife and I have had a real conflict, or maybe there was a real problem that came up in our marriage, the irony, the beautiful irony, is that once we were able to talk it out, to be able to hear one another, respectfully understand why the person had a problem to begin with, or, we heard one another. So both of us felt like the other person was respectful, understanding what our complaint was. Guess what? From that very difficult moment, we were able to then grow in intimacy in our marriage. And we're not just talking physical. We're talking on a whole different level of like, now I know you even better than I did before. I know that this sets you off. I know why it sets you off. I know that it sets you off because this happened to you in the past. And now I want to be sensitive to you, my bride, because this sort of behavior is very, very damaging to you. Or even unbeknownst to me, maybe something that it really bothers you. Well, guess what? We're a team, right? Ride or die. Either two winners or two losers. So I want to identify why this is an issue for you. I want to listen to that. And I want to be able so we can work together, truly know one another, right? As the Bible says, a husband knew his wife, a wife knew her husband. This is not just a physical concept. It's all encompassing. We're like, now I'm really becoming an expert. I'm not an expert yet, but I am learning how to become an expert at marriage because, conflicts, they don't make anyone special. It's not a sign that somehow your marriage is in trouble because you have conflict. That just means you're human. So fear not. Fear not, all married couples out there. If you are in a season of fighting, this doesn't make you special. This doesn't mean that your marriage is doomed. However, if a couple is repeatedly unable to learn how to resolve this conflict in a healthy way, avoiding the 4 deadly horsemen of marriage, then it's going to go south very quick. And so it's very important for married couples, if you're running into a rough patch and you're not as a couple able to overcome this, there's no harm and foul in talking to your pastor and calling up a marriage counselor saying, you know what, honey, this isn't an F on our report card. It just means that we need a professional opinion to help us get through this time. Okay, there's no harm and foul in that. Also, in the heat of the moment, sometimes that's not the best time to have this conversation. Know when to, in the 80s, Top Gun was such a great movie. You revisit it now and it's like, it's just a cheesy, it's very cheesy, but epic nonetheless. It's part of our childhood. But, you hit the eject button, eject, the plane is in a jet wash, it's spinning, it's about to crash, hit the eject, right? So if either you or your spouse has gotten to a point in the conflict resolution conversation where at this point, it's not getting anywhere, it's getting heated, it's turning into the presidential debate, hit the eject button, say, honey, let's take a quick break. Let's take a breather and come back to this, okay? I feel like if we continue right now, we're going to say or do something that we're going to regret. Because 10 times out of 10, people usually say and do things that they regret when their emotions are flooded, right? They feel angry, they feel unheard, and it's just very unhealthy, right? Learn how to step away when you sense the temperature rising too high. My wife's pretty good at that. I gave her permission to do that, and in the moment, it really annoys me when she wants to eject. But, I'm usually grateful in the long run when she does that because it means we didn't, escalate to somewhere else where we shouldn't have, right? But to be able to learn how to grow in love, even through those moments of conflict. Once again, it doesn't make you special. Every couple on earth has conflicts, has arguments, has bad days, has things that set them off. But it's the couples who really learn how to mature in love and communication and to become experts really in marriage. They learn how to take the difficult situation and to communicate through it so that they can grow in intimacy. And so what was once the stumbling block now becomes the stepping stone to even greater and more authentic love. So don't be afraid of it, but just learn how to grow through it.
Yeah.
So,
And I love what you're saying that, don't try to figure it out on your own. I mean, get to marriage counseling, and even if your spouse won't go, that shouldn't stop you from going to marital counseling. I mean, it'd be great if they could come along. It'd be a heck of a lot more helpful, but if they won't, you still deserve that. Because some of you may be thinking, hey, the four horsemen, our marriage is a barn. Like, it's a stable. Those horses live here. I mean, there's manure all over the living room. I mean, they're taking up residence. So, I mean, that's when you want to get some help in there, because, I mean, Chris and I are very open. Like, we go to marriage counseling because it's hard. Like, it's really difficult. But the insights that you can get from sometimes someone looking in the outside are priceless. I mean, just the marriage workshop we went to this last weekend. I mean, I remember one line someone said during the workshop is that at every point in a marriage, you have to grieve what you're not getting in that relationship. And it hit me like a ton of bricks of just like, wow, it reminds me of like a priest I know that went through a period of authentic grieving in his priesthood that he wouldn't become a husband and a father. And it was so healthy to be able to process that angst instead of letting it boil up into you to the point where it ruptures. And I think in a lot of marriages, I've heard the anecdote that in marriages, a lot of times the woman is dissatisfied because her husband won't change, and he's unhappy because she changed. But in every marriage, there comes a point where you feel like I'm not getting something I want. And a lot of people think, oh, well, it must be because I married the wrong person, because if I only married her over there, then I'd be getting everything I want. Instead of learning on the front end of like, no, the grieving process has to happen, because marriage is not an idol. And you can't expect the person to fill every need. And if you could just come to grips with it's going to be disappointing at times. And granted, there are situations where it isn't a matter of grieving what you're not getting. I mean, maybe there's abuse, there's infidelity, there's serious red flags that it might even be an invalid marriage. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about even in the valid sacramental marriages that are just tough. There's going to come a point you're going to need to grieve. Maybe this guy wasn't all 147 things on my list that I dreamed of when I was 16 years old. And I promise God that if I behave, he'll give me a perfect spouse. He wants to mature us, I think, through that time of suffering. But what would you recommend, for someone getting ready to marriage? And this is the last two questions. How do you lay the foundation for a successful marriage to make it easier, on the front end, to make sure, that you're going to have a marriage that lasts till death do us part?
Yeah. And Jason, I have to actually peace out real soon because I have to pick up my daughter from school.
Okay.
But I would say, just going back to what we were talking about, even for single people who are just getting ready to date, it's really preparing yourself, right? Are there any issues in my life that are causing me problems, just mentally, emotionally? Do I have any baggage from my childhood, maybe past family experiences that were negative? Because those have a way of traveling with us into our future relationships. There's the famous quote, hurt people, right? Yeah. And if you don't heal your wounds from the past, they're going to bleed on your future relationships, right? You're going to bleed all over people. And so there's a real component of preparing our hearts so that we can give of ourselves in a healthy way. And naturally, marriage is hard. It is very challenging. And it's not about marrying the perfect person because they don't exist, right? It's learning how to become the perfect spouse for this person right in front of you. That is the great challenge, the great task of love before us. And like you said, Jason, wonderful, like just not being afraid of saying, hey, let's go to counseling. Why? I mean, professional athletes have what? Trainers.
Yeah.
When we get sick, we go to what? Doctors. When we have problems in our marriage, what do? We gamble, we shop, and we drink. Mm-hmm. What? That's the reality. It's like sometimes there's this taboo in our culture that we can't go there. But yeah, there's no harm and there's no foul in doing that. In fact, that's one of the most noble things you can do so that you can grow as a couple. And maybe you're not well versed in how to do this or how to resolve conflict because you never saw it done in a healthy way growing up. Well, you change the cycle that God's calling us to be. Yeah. So
I would say, go on ahead.
No, yeah. Just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of that. And just one last point that I'll leave you with, Jason, is having. I've done this pretty early on in our marriage with Maggie, but we have like crosses around the house and images of our Lord, like the Divine Mercy image. This is the honest truth. There are times where like I feel so flooded with negative emotion. I have no other rationally helpful thing to do except look at the cross, look at the image of our Lord, and begin praying. Because I know, like, left to my own device, I can't do it. I can't be charitable. I can't be kind. I can't hear my wife out. I can't even hear myself out sometimes, you know. And so really turning to prayer in those moments or those seasons where you really feel like you've hit a rough patch. You feel like you hear the voice of the enemy creeping in saying, you guys don't belong together. You guys should end this. You should do everyone a favor. You should call it quits. Those scary voices, those very deceiving voices that enter into moments like this. And we're all susceptible as humans, right? We all get tempted. And it's like when these voices creep in, you know, you need to bring these to the feet of the Lord and let the Lord slay these things. Because once again, he ties really tight knots, in marriage. And when you got married to your spouse, it wasn't just you and your spouse saying, we're going to muscle through this. It was God making a covenant also with you. What God has brought together, no man shall put asunder. And like, this is awesome, because this means this is not through the grace of man, but the grace of God, that we will be able to complete the vows that we have made, you know, mission accomplished in heaven. And so, we, you know, relying on the Lord ultimately, who is the author of love and forgiveness and kindness and grace. This is the consolation we have as married people in the church.
No, it's good stuff. I mean, this is awesome, Paul. I mean, because I love what you're saying. Like, if you don't kind of heal your wounds, you're going to transfer those wounds onto other people. And so don't wait till you're married, even, I'd say, to go to counseling. I mean, go now when you're single. Start sifting through this stuff. Because a lot of times I think we develop coping mechanisms when we're kids, almost as survival strategies. And maybe it's I withdraw during conflict or I rage and manipulate. And we pick up these strategies because it's just how we learn how to survive in traumatic situations growing up. But then we drag that baggage into marriage and we have to rewrite the whole hard drive on how we communicate. And so if you start noticing this stuff before you get married, dive in, go to counseling. There's websites like catholictherapist.com where you can dive into this stuff. But I know you got to run to pick up your daughter so that you don't have to call her an Uber or anything. Why don't you give them a real quick where people can get the Catholic Adulting course and where they can tune in. I know we've got the link there in the show notes, but just one last pitch where people can learn about the program you just created.
Absolutely. I'd be so happy for people to journey with us. There's over 225 members from 12 different countries who have joined a Catholic Guide to Adulting. And it's an online course and community that I've been so honored to create in these past few months. And it covers so many different topics, from faith to relationships to discernment, dating, finance, career path, our call of holiness. And I wanted to create, once again, a cohesive one-stop shop. Obviously, it's not going to be the end-all be-all, but it's a great tool, great resource for Catholic young adults who want to level up in their young adult journey, where there are so many questions, there are so many pitfalls, and there are so many success moments to be had if you have the right guidance and the right tools. And so a Catholic Guide to Adulting is my response. And thank the Lord, his response also in giving that encouragement to young adults who just want to live their best lives in Christ. So go to catholicadulting.com to find out more. Just as it sounds, catholicadulting.com. You can find out more about the program. If you'd like to learn more about my ministry, you can go to pjkmusic.com or just do a quick Google search for Paul J. Kim. Really quick, Jason, just to share this on my social media later. Let's take a little quick photo here on the screen. Little meta. All right, Here we go. All right, cool. Anyways, I appreciate you here, Jason.
Oh, well, thank you for coming on. And everybody watching, again, the link to Paul's program is in the show notes. You're also going to find in the show notes where to pre-order the book that Matt Fradd and I are just about to come out with, Forged, for guys on how to grow in chastity. Also, 14 free days on Hollow, and then the free ebook for ladies on the top 10 guys that you are better off without. And so God bless you. Thank you for joining us. And again, please keep the Kim family and ours in your prayers and be assured of ours in return. God bless you, Paul. Thanks for coming on with us today.
Thanks, brother. God bless.
Right.
See you all.
Peace out.